Today we're going to talk about transporting your chickens for butchering. So if you have chickens that you are looking to have processed at a USDA-certified poultry plant, you're going to want to take these steps before you bring them to the processing plant. I hatch lots of chicks in my incubators, and half of those chicks typically are male, and I do my best to sell those males, but when that doesn't happen and they don't sell, I found myself with an abundance of roosters. So I did recently process 14 roosters, and now I could have processed them myself here on the farm, but after weighing the pros and cons of the cost associated with doing it ourselves here and getting the equipment needed or renting the equipment, we decided it was more cost effective to bring them to a USDA poultry processing plant. But I wanted to let you know that if you're going to do that, make sure that you schedule it in advance. When I called, I was surprised to find out that there was a 6-week wait for getting them in, because I was looking to get them in sooner than that, but I did have to wait that stretch, and in the meantime the roosters had started fighting with each other. So ideally you should set that date for when you know your chicken is going to be at the correct age for butchering. I raise Buff Orpingtons, and so for Buff Orpingtons, ideally about 6 months of age works well for butchering roosters. My roosters were 27 weeks of age when I had them processed, and they ended up coming back with a carcass weight of approximately 4 pounds, somewhere a little bit less than that, somewhere a little bit over 4 pounds. And so for our family, that was a good sized chicken for us to have for a dinner. Okay, so then you have your date set. You want to make sure you're raising your chickens so that they're healthy, clean, parasite-free before you bring them for butchering. So you want to make sure they have lots of clean bedding, make sure they are clean before you take them to the processing plant. Also, when it comes to parasites, you want to make sure that they don't have parasites before you're bringing them to the facility as well. So you can choose to do a dewormer in advance to get rid of any parasites. Just make sure with the dewormer that you choose that you look at the withdrawal periods, because you want to make sure that the meat's not contaminated during that time frame of butchering. Personally, I like to use diatomaceous earth as a natural dewormer for my chicken, so that's something I sprinkle in their feed as an all-natural preventative for parasites. Now, as that date is approaching for processing time, you want to think about how you're going to get your chickens from your farm safely to the processing plant. There are many ways to do this. You do need them to be contained so that they can safely travel. They do make chicken crates specifically for transporting chickens. That is something that you could potentially rent. That is something that the processing plant that I went to, Buffoni's, they said that I could have borrowed theirs, or you can purchase your own. They are a little pricey, so it wasn't something that I was interested in purchasing. I personally used a pet carrier and a cat tower, cat playpen sort of thing. So I was able to get both of those free off of Craigslist, and so that was a savings for me there. I was able to fit 4 roosters inside of the pet carrier, and then I put 10 roosters in the cat tower, which I had laid on its side. Now, when you lay it on your side, you're going to have wiring at the bottom that if it's shifting, they can get their toes stuck in there and break their toes while transporting. And you want to keep their stress down while transporting. So what I did was I put down cardboard in order to not only protect their feet from the metal rungs, but also to kind of contain the mess. And then I put paper towels down to help for traction, to keep them from slipping too much while traveling. I did the same thing in the pet carrier as well, and that really helped with containing the mess. Now, the mess should be minimal if you do take away their food the night before. So general guidelines say about 12 hours before. That's what the poultry plant had recommended, was take that food away 12 hours in advance. They were butchered at 9 in the morning, so I had planned to take the food away after they had their dinner the night before. I ended up taking it away around 5 o'clock that evening because they had gone up to roost. They were ready for bed, so I did take it away then, and that worked out well. You just want them to be able to empty out their digestive system, and so that way there's nothing in their system when they get processed. So definitely don't feed them the next morning before taking them to be processed. Now, when it actually comes to physically driving them to the processing place, there are things you need to think about. So you need to think about temperature. So chickens can get heat stress easily. Transporting them in the early morning hours, if it's going to be a hot day, earlier in the morning before the sun really gets hot, would be a better bet. Make sure that they have ventilation, and if there's a lot of sun, providing shade for them. We had them processed in December, so it was winter here. Luckily, it was a mild day, so the chickens did just fine with traveling in the crates without any sort of cover. They had plenty of ventilation and they did well. We did go on the highway to get to the processing plant, and they didn't have any issue with the wind. We did have them packed snugly with each other, so there wasn't a lot of jostling around, and we had the kennels secured in the back of the truck, so that way they kept each other from shifting too much. So that worked well for us. You can put down tarps as well to help contain the mess in the bed of the truck, or if you're using a car to transport them. Now, if you don't have a dog or cat kennel or cat tower, there are other ways that you can transport them, whether that be in a Tupperware that you have created lots of ventilation holes in, or a cardboard box that you have secured to be closed, because you definitely don't want a chicken escaping while you're driving. And make sure there's just plenty of ventilation, because you do not want them getting heat stress. You could potentially get a wooden crate and make sure there's ventilation holes in that. You could build a wooden crate of your own size. You just want to make sure size-wise that your chickens are fitting snugly, not too tight, but not so much room that they're shifting and falling all over the place and getting thrown around. As for our experience with the poultry processing plant, we brought them, we pulled right up, and they were ready for us. They were so nice, so complimentary, saying how beautiful our birds were. They handled them gently, and we were really happy with the service because they took them right in and processed them right then, right there, right in front of us. And it was nice to see that everything was so clean, and it was an assembly line process, and one step to the next, plenty of workers to do each part of the processing, and so it was a very quick process. And so it did make me feel better that the roosters weren't sitting around waiting. It was just a very quick process. And we actually returned back that evening around 5 o'clock to pick up the processed birds, so it was a quick turnaround. They were able to process them and then chill them, and we were able to pick them up. We did receive them back in a large box, and they were all packaged. So for 14 roosters, it was $5.25 per rooster to be processed and placed into a plastic bag. Now, this is for personal consumption. We did not opt to have the birds labeled to be able to sell them because we're just eating them ourselves. We did pay an extra $5 to get the big box to transport them back home in. And so the total cost for 14 birds to be processed and come back in a big box was $78.50. So we felt that was a great deal because it would have cost us more in rental fees to rent the equipment, and significantly more had we invested in the equipment needed to process them ourselves here at home. And also the time that it would have taken us as beginners learning how to do it. It probably would have taken us a couple days to process half of the birds. It probably would have been like a 4-day process just because of how many birds we had and how much we would have to learn as we go. So this worked out really well for us. And if you have chickens that you are looking to have processed, it's definitely something that I would recommend doing. We're really happy with how delicious the birds are, and gratitude that we have for our meal, knowing that we raised the animal and it was raised well, and that we've provided a delicious meal for ourselves and our family. It's definitely rewarding. So then you get your chickens back. How do you cook those chickens? So check out my next video to see how I cooked my backyard roosters. Not these guys. These guys are staying. Clifford and T-Bone, they're part of the breeding flock and they're here to stay. And if you haven't started your farm yet, what are you waiting for? Get your farm on.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you want a farm? A wicked awesome farm. Watch this channel to learn what to do. We love to farm and we'll show you. Yeah, welcome to our show. Whoa. Just watch.